In this video, we are talking about the opposite of a number and negative numbers. And when we say the opposite of a number, all we need is the number we start with multiplied by -1. So, in other words, the opposite of 1 is -1. The opposite of 2 is -2. And the reason is because if we take 2 and multiply 2 by -1, we get -2. In the same way, if we start with a negative number, like -10, the opposite of -10 would be +10. Because we took -10, we multiply it by -1, and we multiply these two negative numbers together. They cancel with one another and we get a +10. So the positive of -10 will be +10. Now we can use number lines to better see why this is the case. So we're going on number lines. We can deeply learn this section using the number lines. Let's find the opposite of +3. Remember, when we have the number line, everything this way is positive and everything this way to the left is negative. So when we see +3, we move to the right in the positive direction 3 units. So 1, 2, 3, and here we are. So we want to find the opposite of this point. Let's think about it this way. We're standing on this point and we're holding a stick with the length of +3. We flip this stick over to the origin, so it drops right here. The head of this stick will give us the opposite of the position that we are standing on it. So the opposite of +3 will be -3. So let's go for another example with negative numbers, like -2. This is a negative number, so we gotta move to our left 2 units. So 1, 2, we're standing here, holding a stick with the length of 2, and we flip it over to the origin. It will go and drop here. The head of this stick will point to the number that is the opposite of the number that we are standing on it. So the opposite of -2 will be +2. So we have two questions here. When true values that are added together here, we have 1 plus a negative number. 1 plus -2. So if we graph that along our number line, we start with +1. We move to the right in the positive direction, 1 unit. And we get to this point here, +1. Now we want to add to that -2. 1 plus -2. Well, this plus sign here basically tells us go in the direction indicated by the number that follows. So the fact that this is a negative number tells us to move to the left. So this plus sign says yes, move to the left, so -2. We're moving to the left from the point we were. We go 1, 2 units to the left and we get to this point here, which is -1. So what we know is that this is equal to -1. And that makes sense to us because we know that adding a negative number is the same as subtracting. So this is really just 1 minus 2, which means that's equal to -1. So we learned that the plus sign says go in the direction indicated by the number that follows. In the second example, we have a negative sign here. Because we have a negative sign here and we have a negative number that follows, these -2 right here tells us to move to the left. But the minus sign in the middle says go in the opposite direction. So instead of going to the left, we're going to the right. So what we're doing here, we start with the 1, I move to the right 1 unit, and we end up here. Now, if you look at this -2, this -2 would tell us to move to the left 2 units. But the negative sign in the middle says go in the opposite direction. So don't move to the left, move to your right. If we start at this point, now we move to the right 2 units, 1, 2, this is equal to 3. And that should make sense to us because that 1 minus a -2, when we have an even number of negative signs with one another to become a positive sign. So 2 negative signs become a positive sign. and this is the same as 1 plus 2, which is equal to positive 3, and that's why we end up here at the positive 3. So looking at a little bit more of a complicated example, here we have 3 plus 2 plus negative 5 minus 3. We move 3 units in the positive direction, so we go 1, 2, 3. And we end up here at the positive 3. We have plus, that means go in the direction indicated by the number. This is a positive number, so we continue going to the right. We move 2 units to the right, 1, 2, and we end up here at this positive 5 right here. Now, since the plus sign goes in the direction indicated by the negative 5, so from when we were here, we go to the left 5 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have negative 3. So the positive 3 here by itself tells us go to the right, but this negative sign here tells us go in the opposite direction. So we gotta move to the negatives to our left, 1, 2, 3, and here we are. So we know that this whole value equals to negative 3. And that makes sense because if we just do the arithmetic, we get 3 plus 2 equals to 5, and 5 minus 5 gets us back to 0, so negative 3 equals to negative 3. Now, essentially what we learn from doing this is what we talked about at the beginning, that 1 is the opposite of negative 1, that 2 is the opposite of negative 2, and 10 is the opposite of negative 10. So now we know about opposite numbers. But we also know that an even number of negative sign is equal to positive sign. So, in other words, if we are trying to simplify these expressions here, we have negative, negative, negative 2. What we can do is plot this on a number line here. So if you take this first step on the number line, we have a positive 2, so we go 2 steps to the right direction, and here we are. Then we go for the first negative sign. The negative sign says this is the opposite of 2. So the opposite of 2 is negative 2. The second negative sign, another opposite, and the third negative sign, another opposite. So we end up at negative 2. So for the second example here, we do the same. We have positive 2. We go for the opposite, and this is the first negative sign. The second negative sign, another opposite. The third negative sign, another opposite. And the last negative sign tells us to go another opposite for negative 2. And here we are, end up at positive 2. So with all of this, we learned that even number of negative sign is equal to positive sign. So in this case, we want to cancel them in pairs. So 2 negative sign becomes a positive sign. 2 more negative sign becomes positive, and we just left with positive 2. So at the previous example, we can do the same thing and change these 2 negative signs into positive sign, and you will see your answer.